All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hockey fans of all ages, I am Beast Mike you. Now riding my train of thought. It's time to talk about the NHL Power Rankings. We're getting close to the end of the season, and we're getting closer to what I think is the best playoffs in the four major sports in North America, the NHL playoffs. They are incredible and entertaining, but that's in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk about the Power Rankings right now. And we're going to start, as new always, if you will, in the Eurostar Zombie Tier. Vancouver beat the Avalanche. I did not misspeak. The Vancouver Canucks not only beat the Avalanche tonight, they did it in Denver. And they also did it while putting up an 8-piece. Now, sure, Colorado put up 4 goals in a row to tie the game up at 6, but the fact that Vancouver actually did this is impressive in itself. Good on you, Canucks. There aren't too many ways that the Canucks are going to win games, and the way they did it tonight, I guess it works. It even works against the eventual President's Trophy winners. Good on you. Chicago, 20-piece combo. The theme for the Blackhawks over the last week is actually pretty simple. It's the simple fact that the Blackhawks gave up a lot of goals. How many? Well, 20. They gave up an average of 5 goals a pop over 4 games. 2 games of 5 apiece, a game with a 6-piece, and somebody decided to slack and ended up scoring 4. The slackers in question were the Winnipeg Jets, but more on them later. And the other 3 losses were by the ESL teams in question, being the Flyers, the Rangers, and the Devils in order. Not great, Bob. The Rangers were the team with the 6-piece. Not a great week for Chicago, as Chicago has been basically tanking for the last, few years now, and it continues as scheduled, I guess you could say. New York Rangers, speaking of which, only East elimination. Yeah, believe it or not, the East is so competitive, the Rangers are the only team in it that has been guaranteed to not make the playoffs. Now, to be fair, the Rangers have been pretty much like this for the majority of the year, but the fact that the Rangers are the only ones where you look up at a standings chart and they have an E next to their name in the East, it's not great, Rangers. It's, again, incredibly wild to think that 2 years ago, these were the President's Trophy winners. And they've been nowhere near that point since. Poor Igor Shesterkin. Dude's getting his career wasted and in goalie fights now. That's kind of happening. Calgary, weight classes. You saw the difference for the Flames between what they did against a team in this tier, i.e. Vancouver, and then what they did against a team that's not in this tier, in the form of said Avalanche. They put up a touchdown with the extra point against Vancouver, which is good. And then they gave up a 9-piece combo to the Avalanche in the very next game. Again, you see the weight class difference. Calgary obviously is in the zombie tier weight class, while the Avalanche are certainly not. Vancouver definitely is, as I just mentioned. Florida. New York Minutes. They had a pretty rough weekend in New York, which is, it happens, and not necessarily on the ice. But in the case of the Panthers, both New York teams got their pounds of flesh, I guess, in the form of the Islanders and the Rangers both putting up a bunch of goals and handling business. Islanders you kind of expected from, because they're pretty good and should make the playoffs. The Rangers, they're the reason why they're in this tier. And for Florida, again, is a gap year, and it continues. They're kind of just like slogging their way through the finish. And once the Panthers get there, okay, fine, cool, we'll chalk it up and then see what they can do next year. With presumably some health and actual rest, considering the 3 straight runs to the Stanley Cup Finals that this Panther core has made. St. Louis, somehow not dead. To be fair, if you're not Vancouver or Calgary in the Western Conference, you're not dead at all, because they're all boxed in outside of the 3 Titans of the Central Division. Everyone else is within somewhat of striking distance, I would say. Now, Anaheim's going to make the playoffs, sure, and Edmonton probably too. But every other spot seems like it's kind of fair game. And for the Blues, they're playing better lately. 6-2-2 in their last 10. They've been very impressive. I guess the question is for St. Louis, are they going to run out of time before the season ends? I guess that's the big deal with the Blues. Toronto, one fight night. There are several 3-word combinations I could use, as in pound of flesh or got Gudis back. There's a lot of different combos I can use. But in the case of the Maple Leafs, I think the most important one is that they won the game and won the fights. good on you. They had to get revenge for what they did, what happened with Austin Matthews. They had no choice. They had no choice but to come out swinging physically against the Anaheim Ducks. And it turns out this was probably their most meaningful win of this hockey season. Yes, it's been a disastrous year for the Maple Leafs, but they needed this. They needed this in the worst way possible to make Anaheim feel it and then possibly take some bodies with them as Anaheim is going to make the playoffs, as I mentioned previously. Connor Garcia got hurt, and Radko Gudas wasn't right. Probably shouldn't have played in the game anyway, but I guess he understood he had to take his lumps. And the Ducks took some beatings, but ultimately, good on you, Toronto, for getting this done. And it was the big boys, Tavares and Nylander and Morgan Rielly especially, that got the job done. Toronto's played a little bit better lately, too. I will give them their credit. Obviously, they're going to run out of time in making the playoffs, but at the very least, they're going to look all right, and their pick they're probably going to give to Boston won't be as bad as it possibly could have been. And Seattle, lacking high end. That's kind of where I think the Kraken are at this point. They just don't have that high-end guy, and I like Shane Wright. Do they like Shane Wright? I don't know. But I think that Seattle just needs a higher-end infusion of talent. Jordan Eberle's a good player. The problem is that's what he is good. Not great, not elite. And I think where Seattle, unfortunately, lacks is just not elite guys. They just don't have them yet. Can Wright get there if he stays there? Maybe. But I think he's got the best shot to get there for now. What does Seattle do here? Does Seattle shake it up? Or Seattle try to go crazy like Vegas has done in getting high-end talent? What does Seattle do from here? And they're not going to make the playoffs, at least they shouldn't. They're not officially dead, but the way they're playing, it feels like they're going to run out of time before they can get back and making a run at the playoffs again. We're going to go to the UK Pacer Monkey's Paw Tier. San Jose, got to swim fast. If the Sharks are going to get out of this funk that they were in mid-March, they got to move, and they got to move quick if they're going to make the playoffs. And I wonder with this logjam in the Western Conference if they're just going to be able to jump over enough teams to get there. Macklin Celebrini is going to need some help. That means you, Will Smith. That means all the Sharks in question. They're going to need some help to make this jump and get back into this dance that they were in for a majority of the year until mid-March happened and they went and got cratering quick. I think the Sharks have a shot at it. I just don't know if they have enough time to get this done. Los Angeles, Mammoth Take 4. We're sticking with the 4 theme, and it's going to be a little different here. The Kings have played 4 games since Sunday, and 2 of them, unfortunately, were against the Mammoth, and both were L's. One where they allowed 4 goals, and one where they lost by 4 goals. The games in between, there was another 4-piece added in here with the free win against the Canucks, but they lost to the Flames, another zombie tier team. No bueno Kings. A little concerning that Los Angeles is kind of crumbling and fast, and it's on the board that LA, it's very well on the board. They are the 9th place team in the West that this team does not make the postseason. Even with all their injuries, I guess you could see why. Panarin and company helped get one last run in the playoffs for Anze Kopitar and the Kings in this run, in this era. I guess we'll see. New Jersey. Really? The Rangers? The Rangers are bad, and the Devils are still getting curb stomped by them? That's not great, New Jersey. Now, true, New Jersey's been kind of cooked for a couple months now, but that's a pretty rough one to go. And it's a shame because the Devils have actually played respectably well over the last few weeks. So they've been a decent hockey team, but is getting cooked by the Rangers is not the way to go. There's no shame losing to Carolina. They did also do that, but they beat a white-hot Nashville team, which is really, really impressive before said Carolina beatdown. But the Rangers cooking you is, at least these Rangers cooking you is not great. And whatever hope that New Jersey might have had in making the playoffs, it was crushed long ago, but that's a really bad stain that you have to deal with. Speaking of Nashville, they're next, losing their 2. After the Predators were scorched earth and burning everything around them or eating everything around them because they're Predators after all, Nashville has suddenly kind of lost a little bit of form lately, losing 3 straight and only 5-4-1 in their last 10. It's not great. Fortunately, since the West is so mid outside of the Central 3, they are at least in the last playoff spot. It's them in LA at this point. And as LA's game is still going with St. Louis, that may flip where the Kings could jump them. The Kings are up 1-0, and there's about 4 minutes left in the third. So by the time these power rankings end, I'll be able to update on whether the Kings have jumped the Predators in the playoffs. I guess we'll see. Winnipeg, emerging like Jericho. And I will give the Jets this. They are starting to get a little bit of form and starting to get a little hot here. Winnipeg, believe it or not, you can sense the theme here, not dead. They are only a point behind said Predators. Obviously, the Predators tied with the Kings, so they have climbed their way back and fought their way back, or I guess you could say, flew their way back into the playoff race. Emerging like Chris Jericho did on AEW tonight. I guess that's a thing. I will give the Jets props for making it happen and making a surge back into the postseason race. Good on you, Winnipeg. I kind of wanted to see Connor Hellebuyck back in the playoffs. I did kind of want to see that, especially after the gold medal that he basically allowed the U.S. to win. Vegas, non-casino risk. So the Golden Knights fired their coach and then hired John Tortorella. For those of us who remember John Tortorella, we may remember him last as the Flyers head coach, where it was kind of a square peg round hole. Tortorella is used to veteran teams and does better with the vet teams, and the Flyers were an absurdly young one. And then Matvei Michkov probably considered him as an op. How do we know this? Matvei Michkov looked like a Hart Trophy winner the second he got fired. Tortorella got fired, and he was basically absurdly great. Like, dude played like he was McDavid or Draisaitl or McKinnon or something the second he got fired. Torts had been on TV ever since, and then got the job with Vegas this past week. Is that going to be enough for this veteran team to make another run at the finals and another run at the Cup? Could be. Torts does well with veteran teams, and Vegas is gritty enough to make it happen. Can Mark Stone and company do it, though? Washington, Ovi keeps scoring. Yep, he's over 1,000 goals. He scored 2 a couple nights ago against the Flyers. And Alexander Ovechkin continues to do, well, Ovi things. Now, the Capitals, to their credit, have played much better lately, and they're on a run of form. And they're not too far out of the playoff race, which is suddenly getting absurdly crowded in the East. Can Washington leap enough teams to do this, though? And do they have enough scoring aside from Ovi to get this job done? That power play still got to improve, though, even though they were decent a couple nights ago. And Utah, a mixed bag. The Mammoth have had a good run of form against the Kings, and against other teams they've played in the last week or so, it's been kind of questionable. I'd already told you the Kings stuff. Okay, cool, fine. But allowing a touchdown and an extra point at the Capitals, not great. And then allowing a 5-piece also against the Oilers, also not great. There's a reason why Edmonton's not in this tier right now. Plus that Ducks loss where they got crushed by Anaheim, also not great. The Kings wins aside, needless to say, it's been a little disappointing. Utah's got a cushion on the playoff race in the Western Conference, but I guess the question is, since they don't have LA games left, what do you do against the other 30 teams in the NHL, Utah? What do you do against them? Next up, the California Zephyr, and we're going to take it to playoff tier. Anaheim, Goodis takes bullets. Yeah, he probably shouldn't have played in the game against the Maple Leafs on Monday, but I'm glad he did because the Toronto had to have some receipts paid out, and Goodis was one of the people that needed those receipts paid out. Good on you, Radko Gudas, for playing. Now, Anaheim has had a kind of mixed bag of form where they've looked good in some games and have looked rough in others. They somehow couldn't get stops against Toronto, and that's part of the reason why they lost. Also, to be fair to the Maple Leafs, they played as if that was a Stanley Cup final game. I got to give Toronto credit for that. Anaheim should be fine in the sense of making the playoffs, yes. But the division is very well in play. It is absolutely potential for them to lose. Now, they're currently winning 3-2 against San Jose, currently in San Jose. There's about 5 minutes left in the third period. By the time these power rankings end, it's on the boards. I'm going to be able to update on what happened here. But what's happening next is one of the teams that Anaheim lost to this past week, Edmonton. Impressive surge. For those of us who considered that they would be in real trouble without Leon Draisaitl, those rumors are kind of exaggerated. Edmonton's played really well since the Draisaitl injury. And yes, McJesus and Bouchard are doing their thing, but it's a really good team effort from an Edmonton team that we really shouldn't have disrespected like this. Edmonton also made a statement win against Anaheim, as I mentioned, as I kind of sort of glossed over, and are all of a sudden only 2 back of the Ducks, even though the Ducks are playing right now. They're 2 back against the Ducks with some games left. They don't have any of them against Anaheim left, which is not great, but there are games against Vancouver and Chicago still left on their schedule. There's also a Colorado game that could be big, but we'll see if Edmonton can make up the ground they need to steal the division away from the Ducks. Detroit, number 5. This is not a 5-piece wing combo or 5 pieces of pizza at LCA. This is not one of those. The number 5 represents goals that they've allowed the Red Wings in a couple of their games recently, where Detroit has had some very leaky goaltending against the Pennsylvanian teams, the Flyers and the Penguins. Both scored 5 on the Red Wings domes, and they also lost both those games rather convincingly. Well, the Flyer game became way less convincing because Detroit scored a bunch of goals in like 3 minutes, but the Flyers held them off. The Pittsburgh game didn't have such luck. That was not great. They also put up a 5-piece against the Sabres, though, and won that game. So I guess there's that. Still, the Red Wings are kind of faltering at the wrong time and are going backwards as a lot of the East is going forwards. And that's not great for a team that probably needed to make the playoffs before some serious questions needed to be asked. Ottawa, upcoming gauntlet. Now, the Senators are another one of these teams in the Eastern Conference that are going backwards at the wrong time. And Ottawa's upcoming schedule, and this is after they've lost 3 straight, is not nice. How evil is it? Well, is it Danhausen level evil? Maybe. But what they're dealing with over the next week is the following. And the good news is all these games are at home. The bad news is the opponents coming in, a really good Buffalo team, a really good Minnesota team, a really good Carolina team, and a really good Tampa Bay team. All 4 of these teams are title tier teams. Well, 3 of the 4. I'll explain the one that isn't later. But the point of it is, these 4 teams all are at or close to 100 points apiece, and they're all going to come into Ottawa and facing an ice-cold Senators team. Good luck, Ottawa. You're going to need it in your nation's capital. Good luck, boys. Philadelphia, present and future. The present-day Flyers have really gotten up off the mat and have looked very impressive. A 7-2-1 stretch, even despite the loss to the Capitals last night, or Tuesday night as these recordings will drop. But the future is also coming, and Porter Matone, who actually looked respectable in the game against Washington, and he was needed because there were a lot of hits by that Capitals team. They like to hit people. The Flyers have looked pretty good, and it hasn't really mattered who's been in net for these games. Yes, Daniel Vladar has been the better goalie, but Sam Emerson has also played respectably well over the last, month or so, pretty much since the Olympic break ended. There's been some really good contributions from the likes of Travis Konecny and Owen Tippett, who are both going to score 30 goals this year, it would seem. And obviously, Trevor Zegras is continuing to do his thing. The Flyers have played better, and they're right back in this playoff race. And there's a monster game coming up with Detroit on Thursday night at Xfinity Mobile Arena. The Flyers, as I just mentioned, just beat the Red Wings last Saturday night. Can they double up and keep up with the teams in the East that they're going to have to pass with a few games left? They do have a game in hand. Columbus, losses catching up. A Columbus team that it felt like went a month without actually losing, and losing in regulation especially, are starting to actually catch L's, which honestly is still kind of surprising. And this 4-game losing streak has got them on the board where they could absolutely find a way out of the playoffs if things don't roll right. And these games in question, 3 of the 4 are regulation losses. Again, not great. The one in overtime was to Boston. Losing to San Jose, not great. And then losing to Montreal, and I mentioned Boston, and then Carolina kind of handled them on Tuesday night. The point of it being, it's not looking great for a Columbus team that was white hot for most of the last 2 months and are suddenly faltering. And with that comes a whole lot of drama with Detroit, Ottawa, and Philly coming after them, and maybe even Washington with an outside shot. Columbus is going to have to get hot again fast. New York Islanders, surviving, but I am concerned about the goal scoring against higher end talent teams. How do we know this? Well, Sidney Crosby returned, and I will get to him later, and the Penguins kind of destroyed them. And they couldn't keep up with Buffalo either. That's also not great. Yes, they suffocated the Stars and put them to sleep, sure, but I do wonder against the higher end teams, can they do that consistently enough? The Islanders should be okay when it comes to making the playoffs. Okay, fine. They're in a good Metro division because of the depth in it. But I do wonder upon their entry, do they have enough steam to keep up with and beat some of the teams they're going to have to in the postseason? And Minnesota, okay, but concerning. I like what the Wild have been all year. I get it. Minnesota's been a really good team. Yet this last week of form and last run of form, 4-5-1, it's a little off-putting. They haven't quite had the same energy that they've had since the Stars win. But I do think the Wild are going to ultimately find a way out of this. And maybe it's the 6-3 beating they took against Boston. Maybe part of that's it as their last game. They just haven't had too many of them. And Minnesota literally hasn't played since the Boston game. And they have a game tomorrow against Vancouver, which in theory is a free win before they could really throw a dent in the Eastern Conference over the next week with an Ottawa game and a Detroit game both on the road. It could really throw a dent in the East and the wild card standings. And then one more showdown with Dallas before we get to the playoffs for Minnesota and the impending doom that will be former Minnesota North Stars and Minnesota Wild. I am much looking forward to that fight to the death. Please make it happen. And now we're going to go to the VSOE title tier. Pittsburgh, Sid is back. As I mentioned with the Islanders, Sidney Crosby made his return. He got a couple of assists. The Penguins put up a beatdown and 8 goals on Long Island. A really good run of form by the Penguins. And this is just part of it, where Pittsburgh, in truth, has played some really good hockey and have kept the seat warm, if you will, for their legendary captain. The Penguins are a team that, in theory, with enough depth, and low-key underrated depth, really, could win a round in the playoffs for the first time since before COVID. I'm not kidding. They have not won a playoff round since the 2018 season. And that's wild to say, but it's the truth. Pittsburgh, in theory, should be able to do that, right? And if not, then what do you do? Boston, MIB pen. The Bruins have played so well since that Maple Leafs loss, it feels like they want everyone else to forget that they lost to the Maple Leafs. At least these Maple Leafs, anyway. Boston has played some tremendous hockey, and I mentioned the Columbus game, and they've been white hot ever since, winning 4 straight. The Bruins clearly are trying to prove to everyone that, okay, yeah, Buffalo and Montreal should handle it, and Tampa too, but Boston is at the very least going to be a very dangerous out in the playoffs as long as they make them. They should get in. And I kind of low-key want to see Montreal and Boston do battle again because, of course we do. Can we get that? Will we get that at some point? And can Boston beat Buffalo in a best of 7 if they had to? I kind of want to see that too, to be honest. Montreal, lonely numbers. 1 is the loneliest number, right? And that's actually right on brand for what Montreal has been giving up in terms of goals lately. In the last 3 games, they've given up exactly 1 goal apiece and have won. It seems like a shorter version of a straight sets tennis win. 4-1, 3-1, 4-1. They've kind of dominated teams lately, especially teams that are in playoff contention. That's what's make this run of form incredibly impressive for Montreal. All 6 of their wins are against teams that are currently in or hovering around the playoffs. The teams they've beaten: the Islanders, the Hurricanes, the Blue Jackets in regulation, which was a shock for a lot of people, Nashville, Carolina, once again, so they got 2 against the Hurricanes, and the Lightning. They have been incredibly impressive, and their high-end scoring has been absurdly ridiculous. When things get physical in the playoffs, are these young Canadians ready to deal with the physicality that approaches them? Dallas, a Acela aggravation. The good news is Dallas took care of business in Pittsburgh. They absolutely humbled and dominated the Penguins. The bad news is they had a very rough run of form on the eastern seaboard of the United States and losing to 3 teams that are Acela based. How do I know this? Well, I've been taking ESL. I know how the train moves. But they've got L's recently against the Devils, as I mentioned last week, the Islanders, as they were suffocated, as I mentioned that previously, the Flyers, which was a really good game, and Boston, who are all Acela-based teams, and the latter three are trying to fight for playoff contention. That's not a great run of form, Dallas. I think they're going to be fine. But this is a little concerning that they got handled like this against the Eastern Seaboard teams. Should Dallas recover, though? In theory, yes. Let's see them do it, though. Tampa Bay. Casual 100 points. Now, they're not there yet. Tampa Bay only has 98. They're slacking currently. But they're going to get to 100. And it feels like it's one of the least surprising things in the NHL over the last 5, 6, 7 years is that the Tampa Bay Lightning are just going to get 100 points and they're going to be slotted pretty highly in playoff games. As long as they're healthy, of course. Then this Lightning team is healthy. They've been stable as of late, and it should be relatively fine once we get to the postseason. Will they win their division, though? I haven't mentioned Buffalo yet, and they're still right on pace with them. And I mentioned a surging Boston team and a surging Montreal team that are all coming for them. Can Tampa Bay hold off all these other contenders? The only divisional contender I haven't mentioned so far? Buffalo. Monday showdown. Perfect timing for these two teams to throw down one more time. You may remember the last time the Buffalo and Tampa Bay played each other. It was chaos. It was a whole lot of fights. It was a whole lot of goals. And maybe one of the best games of the year in the regular season. As I mentioned previously, the Lightning have probably had 3 of the 5 or 6 best games of the NHL season. This was certainly one of them against Buffalo in Buffalo about a month ago. Monday, we're going to get the rematch. And will they put up 15 goals and over 100 penalty minutes again? Maybe. We'll see. It's on the board. It's also on the board of these two teams running back in the playoffs. I kind of want to see that, to be honest. And with the way Buffalo has been playing, which has been another ho-hum 6 of 10 run, with the Sabres who just played some good hockey and are now over the 100-point mark once again in their franchise history. It's a great run of form for Buffalo. 6-2-2, by the way. Just to tie a bow on that. They are in a showdown where they're up 2 points on the Lightning for the division, and certainly Monday could determine who wins the Atlantic and who gets to avoid the logjam that is the Atlantic Division, I should say, in the Eastern Conference portion of the playoffs. Carolina, step 1 done. Now, they haven't officially clinched the Metro. They're very outside chance that the Penguins can catch them. They're not going to. Carolina's got a game in hand and are 8 points ahead. That's probably not happening. But what is happening, however, what is probably going to happen, is that the Hurricanes are going to be the 1 or the 2 seed in the Eastern playoffs. Home ice advantage for Carolina has been good to them in postseason play when the Panthers aren't the Ops, or that one Ranger series. Carolina, are you going to make the Stanley Cup Finals? This would probably be a really good year to do that. And if you can't now, then what? Then what do you do? In Colorado, an unexpected evening. As I mentioned with Vancouver, the Avalanche actually lost to the worst team in the league. The President's Trophy winner losing to the worst team in hockey. Yeah, that's, believe it or not, something that actually happened here. And not only did they do that, they gave up 8 goals in the process. This is a team in the Avalanche who I just talked about with the Flames game where they scored 9. Just weird stuff. Still, Colorado's going to be fine. They're going to win the President's Trophy. Not a problem. Okay, understood. It's just one of those nights for Colorado that actually happened and we got to mention at some point. Colorado's going to be all right. They're going to be fine. And Nathan McKinnon's probably going to win the Hart Trophy again because, of course, he is. It's just the way he rolls, the way he gets down. Anyway, Colorado, let's not do that anymore and get ready for the playoffs, pretty much. And with that, that's this week's April Fool's edition of Power Rankings. And no, Vancouver beating Colorado was not an April Fool's joke. It actually happened. The other games are also over and kind of sort of in that while you were sleeping mode that tends to happen. The Kings did beat the Blues 2-1 in overtime. So the Kings are now in that last wild card spot once again. And the Ducks lost in regulation to the Sharks as the other 2 California teams faced each other. 4-3 win for San Jose. They needed that in the worst way possible. So the logjam that is the wild card spot in the Western Conference, Utah's got 82, which is fine. You have 78 for LA, 77 apiece for the Sharks and the Predators, The Sharks have one less game in hand, was why they're ahead, and Winnipeg with 76, with the Kraken 75. So it's kind of wild here. The Blues 74. In the East, it is also insane when it comes to the wild card standings. Boston at 94, and they should be fine. But then Columbus is 88, and this is where the party really starts. Ottawa 86, Philly 86, Detroit 86, all played 74 games apiece. The Capitals have played an extra game and have one less point than those three teams I just mentioned. And the Flyers Red Wings tomorrow night, or tonight, if you will, at XMA, is a monster game in South Philly. Big game for both these teams. Anyway, that is the end of the NHL Power Rankings for April Fool's Day, or April Fool's Week, if you will. Coming up later this week will be the NBA version of the Power Rankings. Will anybody unseat the top 3 or 4 teams? San Antonio, Oklahoma City, Boston, Detroit. Will anybody ruffle those feathers, if you will? It's not looking likely, but I will explain. And also, Orlando, defense. Do you still do that? I kind of need answers to that question. I will explain all of this when we get to NBA Power Rankings later this week, more than likely tomorrow and or Friday. With that being said, the Pacers have actually played better lately. Yeah, that's a real thing. They've got some wins and have humiliated some teams in the process. That means something else is going to have to happen. Washington, you're going to become the first stop of my next train of thought.